well ataon. Star people. Mom ataon. Ocean people. Patinggal ataon. Pahila ataon. Sea people. Yahweh ataon. Humans. Beautiful. The star relative to love.
I have my bottle, so I'm gonna go back all the way to the beginning.
So is this going to be soothing?
Yeah, it will. I think so. Yes, yes, yes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Liz Farrell. I'm the Artistic Director of Painting, Drawing, and Printmaking in our Artist in Residence program. Welcome to Anderson Ranch's Visiting Artist Lecture Series with artist Rebeca Méndez. I want to welcome our virtual participants watching tonight as well. Before we begin, if you could please silence your cell phones. And for our land acknowledgement, I want to recognize that the Anderson Ranch campus resides on the historic tribal lands of the Ute people, who called this area home for over 800 years. In honor of this legacy, we focus on building an inclusive community here, maintaining this as a place for inspiration and creativity in the center of the Rocky Mountains. Rebeca Méndez is an interdisciplinary artist, designer, and educator, examining reciprocal relationships and environmental justice in a multi-species world amid climate change, mass extinction, and a ravaging extractivist society. Her solo exhibitions include the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Anchorage Museum, Laguna Art Museum, Nevada Art Museum, and Museum of Contemporary Art in Oaxaca. Rebeca is a tenured professor in the Department of Design Media Arts and founder and director of the Counterforce Lab at UCLA. So please join me in welcoming Rebeca Méndez.
Hola, everyone. So nice to see you all here. Thank you for coming. I know most of you are in the midst of packing, so I really appreciate your being here. And yeah, so I'll begin. Before I jump in, I just want to show all of you that in my website, a lot of the projects that I'm going to be talking about, they're available there. And in some instances, I'll just be able to talk very short on them. I have an art practice, and I have a design practice. And sometimes the descriptions are really detailed, so you can see the intentions and process on the projects. I have a section called Now. It should really be called Then, because I haven't really updated it at all. But it's exhibitions, interviews, and publications and awards. And today I'll show a small section of my art practice focused on the mostly video and sound installations, not at all on my public art projects. There's just not enough time on that. And I'll speak of my research laboratory at UCLA, which is the Counterforce Lab, which I created around 2015. My lab is a research studio that harnesses the power of art and design to engage with the reality of the global ecological crisis and its ties to environmental injustice. Counterforce Lab is a collection of artists, designers, scientists, and thinkers working in transdisciplinary collaboration with community partners to engage in art making grounded in storytelling and place-based artistic fieldwork practices. At UCLA, my teaching is also focused on ecological arts and justice, both graduate and undergrad. The lab's current project is the Biophilia Treehouse, a public arts initiative to grow a series of living sculptures housing native trees and plants that together constitute a complete ecosystem for site-specific bird indicator species. When built in sequence, a series of biophilia tree houses form an avian corridor, wildlife corridor, that reconnects fractured habitat, especially in dense urban areas where environmental inequities abound. This is our proposal for a biophilia treehouse in South Central Los Angeles. But let's kind of start at the beginning. Many of us consider ourselves to be storytellers, perhaps even myth makers, and we all know that origin stories are powerful. We need as humans to understand who we are and where we came from, to place ourselves in stories and in history. My story and interest in science, in art, and in social and environmental issues begins in Mexico City, where I was born and raised by parents educated as chemical engineers. They taught me to see the world from a physico-chemical point of view. Every time I had the slightest question, chicka boom, the tome of organic chemistry would come to the table, and then the other one, boom, inorganic chemistry. So that's very much how I see the world from the physical-chemical point of view. They instilled in me the respect and love for the natural world, but most importantly, for the nature of matter, its composition, organization, and behavior, its cycles and systems. In other words, they taught me to relate to the world through its design. They fostered in me not just a sense of self-identity, but primarily a sense of self in relation to all matter, to time, and to place. Since I can remember, I've been contemplative, spending hours being with nature and asking, why do living things and physical phenomena take the form they do? What are the essential mechanisms of nature? With these questions in mind, I created a series of time-based artworks called At Any Given Moment. The series explores issues of perception, specifically our relationship to technologically mediated nature. The cross-rhythmic tensions between simple elements, like in this case, blades of grass, modulated by variable speed and light conditions, create visual difference and reveal the patterns that one simple element produces through relationships and complex organization. The work gets exhibited at architectural scale. This is grass 1, and it's captured in Iceland with my 16mm Bolex reflex film camera. And the sound is by composer Drusner that I commissioned. And then this is At Any Given Moment, Fall 1. So there's a lot of works in this series. What is kind of like something that also I think when I'm even remembering this work is a quote by composer Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. He said, "We are all transistors in the literal sense. People always think they are in the world, but they never realize they are the world. And what this means is that there are no phenomena in the natural world that do not manifest themselves as vibratory or rhythmic phenomena. Those vibrations attack us, they modulate us, and in the end become us." This is At Any Given Moment, Fall 1 with volcanic rock. It has about 1 ton of volcanic rock and gravel, and the video projection is about 22 feet by 19 feet. And then this is At Any Given Moment, Grass 2 with burnt wood. 20th century philosopher Henry Bergson has had a profound influence in my life and work. He said that being is in the past. The present is pure becoming. The very instant of becoming is the moment of action, of the creative act, of change, chance, intuition. It is at the root of the concept of élan vital, as developed by Bergson, the spontaneous morphogenesis of things, this explosive internal force that life carries within itself and animates all being. That vital force drives my work. This is At Any Given Moment, River 3. And these and the following works focus on another way of looking at the world in, for example, the first brothers of creation. In Anishinaabe cosmology, the first brothers of creation are the forces in the universe, like the sun, wind, water, oceans, rivers, rain, fire. The second brothers of creation are the plants, who need the sun, the water, all of that. The third are the animals, and last are humans, the younger brothers of creation, who have the most to learn from our non-human brothers. The sound composition is by Matteo Liberatore, and I could say that this is my first music video, because he came with the composition and I selected this river that I had shot in Iceland in 16mm also. And anyway, it just loops forever. My family spent many of our summer vacations deep in the jungles of southern Mexico in pursuit of obscure Mayan archaeology sites, my father's passion. During extensive expeditions, we would spend 1 or 2 months every year, most of the time camping in the jungle, experiencing its overwhelming presence and sounds. I took this photograph in the late 1980s with my first film camera at the archaeological site Jokhib, meaning Great Gateway or entrance. Its modern name is Piedras Negras, and it's located in Guatemala. You can discern the face of Chac, the Mayan god of the rain, overtaken by the jungle. So whether it was animate or inanimate, camping amongst this dense jungle and these archaeological sites, I could sense the vitality and the presence of everything around me, the vibrancy of matter. Sometimes we were able to camp among the Mayan temples, including Uxmal, shown here, surrounded by powerful iconography. This is a drawing by Frederick Catherwood, who in 1839 traveled to Mesoamerica with writer John Lloyd Stephens. Catherwood was trained as an architect, so he began creating detailed visual evidence of the intricate carvings and structures. With charcoal from our campsite fire, we would make rubbings of the glyphs on paper, becoming fascinated by this ancient form of symbolic storytelling. My father also introduced me to photography, starting with the explanation of how Catherwood made these drawings with the aid of the camera lucida. And here I am in Yaxchilan, an ancient Maya city located at the bank of the Usumacinta River in the state of Chiapas, Mexico. All of these experiences helped to form me as a designer, artist, explorer, and environmentalist. So here I come to the project that I am doing while I'm here in the Anderson Ranch Artist Residency, for which I'm incredibly grateful. It involves Rashun Balam, fourth, Bird Jaguar, fourth, Pájaro Jaguar, cuarto, Mayan king of Yaxchilan, which to me is it just dawned on me that this photo has been in my talk for years. And here I am while I'm here working on exactly the same site, focusing on the king of Yaxchilan that ruled from 752 on after the Common Era. So for those of you who have not heard the story, but when my father passed away in 2020, August 3rd, 2020, a few weeks before, we were talking to him in his deathbed, and 4 generations we were there, and we asked, he's like, "Papi, what do you want us to do with your ashes?" And he was very quiet. And then suddenly he totally perked up and says, "I want to be in maracas. I want to continue the party for eternity." And so that idea to me of that we would be able to work with the maracas and do something around this idea of rattles became so important. So I was then the one in charge of doing them. Knowing his passion for archaeology, then I went back and looked into Mayan rattles and different ways of doing the maracas. And then with my family, I spent so many hours talking to them, and tears have fallen in my studio when I was talking to my mom about how to represent my dad. And we focused that it was very important to represent him as Pájaro Jaguar, that it really involves both of his personalities, incredibly courageous, strong, loyal, and at the same time free, so free. So he's Pájaro Jaguar for us. And here are other designs of it and different ways that I started drawing. Even this is the god Jaguar, Jaguar god of the underworld, the night sun, one of the major characters of the Maya pantheon. My father died in a full moon, so it made sense that intuitively I began working with these shapes, not only because of the maraca, but because of the moon. And guess what? I do have one, and it rattles. It's working. So I'm happy to share it with you in a little bit. So back to One is with Nature. Nothing Further Happens is a 10-minute single-channel video captured in 16 millimeter in the Arctic and in the desert of Atacama in Chile, with a commissioned sound composition by Icelandic composer Ben Frost. With this work, I began to explore the concept of the feeling of the sublime, as well as the thick materiality and its presence of the 16 millimeter film, and also its moments of glitch. Immanuel Kant said that the sublime is not so much a formal quality of some natural phenomenon, but more a conception, something that happens in the mind as an experience of limits. In order to clarify the concept of the feeling of the sublime, German philosopher Schopenhauer listed examples of its transition from the beautiful to the most sublime, where the fullest feeling of the sublime was an experience of the immensity of the universe's extent or duration. And there was pleasure from the knowledge of the observer's nothingness and oneness with nature. Philosopher Jean-Francois Lyotard argues that the sublime expresses the edges of our conceptual powers and reveals the multiplicity and instability of our postmodern world. This is also filmed with a 16 millimeter camera, but this one was with an Aton Minima, those of you who know the cameras. I'm interested in how we process what we see, hear, touch, and remember. When the 16 millimeter film image glitches, it is as if you stop seeing at the natural phenomena and you are looking at looking. I drum scan these frames and I create diptychs. My art practice is known as artistic fieldwork, which borrows methods from various disciplines, from geology to environmental science to graphic design, and merges the apparent objectivity of scientific research with a subjective, flexible approach, drawing on multiple methodologies and discourses. Artists engage in exploring and surveying the earth, investigating things in the field, and their projects often take the form of atypical archives, presenting the results of the research in the form of films, photographs, poems, installations, animations, drawings, text, anything. Artist Robert Smithson notes that there are two types of scientists: the one who has the controlled laboratory experiment, and then the field scientist, who is working, in a sense, with the uncontrollable aspects. And that the conflict arises from the perfect isolation as opposed to the chance disruption. The security that comes from working in the lab is very similar to the security that comes of working in the studio. So there is a parallel there. The studio and the lab become places where you can control your information to an extent. But at the same time, the information that you're controlling may not be that interesting. In artistic fieldwork, the stability of studio is constantly challenged by the instability of these extra forces, like, let's say, the weather. Due to climate change, the Arctic Ocean's summer ice cover is now half of what it was 50 years ago. Because of this, many countries are looking at the Arctic with new interests. In 2007, a mini-submarine carrying a Russian politician descended into the ice-covered sea at the North Pole, extending its robotic arm and planted a Russian flag on the seafloor. El Norte is a critique of the prevailing 15th century colonial attitude, and in particular its relation to the current geopolitics of the North Pole. El Norte, my feudal conquest of the North Pole for my country, Mexico, also points to the ambivalence of the Mexican migrants' dream versus reality experience in their journey north to the United States for a better life. And I have to tell you about this story because basically I had to go from a sailboat to a dinghy with my flag all in pieces so I could get to where I would enact this performance. So when I planted my flag, it was supposed to be there, but because it was with tubes, the snow just projected the flag, and that was not supposed to happen. And what was funny is like I just turned like, who killed Kenny, right? It was just a very funny thing. I'm laughing my brains out on my way out because I don't know what to do next. But then, of course, I came back because, hey, it's my flag. The national identity just came back. Anyway, I'll go more in depth into this expedition as it is one way in which I carry on my artistic fieldwork. In 2010, I traveled to Longyearbyen, the largest city on Spitsbergen Island in the international territory of Svalbard Archipelago in the high Arctic, to join a group of international artists, scientists, and educators in an Arctic expedition. Among the several locations we visited is the research village of Ny-Ålesund with an all-year population of 30 to 35. It is the northernmost functional public settlement on Earth, way above Siberia. It was organized by the Arctic Circle, an annual expeditionary residency program, participating in a 3-week residency program aboard the Northerlicht, a two-masted ice-class sailing vessel. We collectively explore one of the most remote and unusual places on Earth, where there's more polar bears than humans, and that at -30, there was nothing out there that wanted me to live. I kept a journal. Here are some with the Svalbard Global Seed Bank, the Doomsday Vault, the boat, map, a haiku, my equipment list. Some of the ideas, there you can see them. My planting the flag is the second one. And then I did a long, a series of photographic prints. This one is on Ny-Ålesund, the polar station. I was very curious of how people live there. And through this presentation, you will see that my practice is focused primarily in 3 extraterritorial or outer spaces: the poles, the atmosphere, and the ocean. Places to imagine our ecological futures, and also places where we kind of monitor climate change and our ecological crisis. So I'm just going to go through the photos. This one is of a Russian town called Barentsburg. And so I was very interested on the relationship of the coal, the mining artifacts, and it's mostly abandoned. So that was very eerie to see all these buildings abandoned. And then only this section lived. The irony of going down into the coal mine and seeing this kind of pristine mural of a forest. This project is called Walking the Earth, where I film myself walking the horizon line. It started around 2013 when I was in Iceland, and this work is a long-term project, which I will continue to capture as long as I live. I want to be like, in a little cane, just going up and continue to document myself walking the earth. Michel de Certeau argued that the practice of walking is analogous to the speech act and can also be understood to create a kind of spacing or syntax in relation to how things are encountered. Walking and travel are described as a form of enunciation that carries the possibility of breathing life, introducing a temporal beat or narrative. I made 54 walks like that, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. So Walking the Earth Oregon was the next iteration of this project, and it came from, I was invited to compete for a permanent public art commission at the Portland International Airport. And these pages are my presentation, but I'll read a little bit here from how this was my presentation to the client. Inspired by the vision of a new main terminal where spaces draw on the fresh feeling of walking through Oregon's many parks, Walking the Earth Oregon is an intimate portrait of a human figure walking through all 9 ecoregions of Oregon, from the Willamette Valley to the Columbia Plateau. The video consists of 18 vertical landscapes, 9 per digital canvas, each depicting a record of the artist walking the earth at the horizon line. So you see how interesting. Before, I'm filming the horizon line from afar, and then I just have to inhabit it, right? I need to bring it to scale. I need to actually sense it at the scale of my body and feel it on my body. Here, I love this quote by Bill Fox from the Nevada Art Museum. Space becomes place when imbued with our presence. And I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip my reading of other things, but I will show you. Here was the sketch. This inaugurated about 2 weeks ago, so I haven't really seen the work. Just like one of the tests, but each one of these screens is 20 feet high by 150 feet. They are facing each other. If you see the black section on this, that's the screen. And it's magnificent. As a public art commission for the moving image, that's rare. Usually they want it to be, tons of steel to last forever. These are the 9 ecoregions of Oregon. I created a very specific clock, so I would have to be at 5:54 a.m. at certain region and then move certain moments so that I could film the entire day. So the only thing that we could do is my husband, who was a producer on the project, we just rented a van and went for a month throughout Oregon because we had to encounter those landscapes. No one could help us. We called park rangers, and no one could say, here is a horizon line, and especially around forests. We used every possible technology from Google Earth to Windy to tell us whether the winds were over 60 miles an hour. We prepared a super tight production schedule, marking each one of our stops. We filmed during the day. And then at night, I had my little Digitech station. We FedEx all of our footage every other day in case we crashed, in case we lost them, so that the work wouldn't get lost. And here I am, walking the earth. Cycle 1, north and south. Cycle 2. It was beautiful. It was one of the most beautiful experiences I've had. I think I'm an artist just to be able to be out in nature. Circumsolar is focused on migration, interspecies friendships, and extinction. Circumsolar is a growing body of artworks that emerge from my profound love for the Arctic tern, a small seabird that makes the longest migration of all creatures, flying from the Arctic to the Antarctic and back again, from boreal summer to austral summer, over 300 miles a day, a year's total of 60,000 miles. They mate for life. They live about 35 years. I'm in love with this creature. Circumsolar Migration 1, which is one of the projects under that umbrella, is a 26-minute video that focuses on the Arctic tern's breeding season. Young terns eat a variety of fish whose own migratory paths are changing due to the warming ocean. Recent research reveals that 90% of the chicks are dying due to starvation, and this is true to most seabirds. With this long-term project, I actively seek to enter the awareness of the Arctic tern, to become with another species, to nurture an interspecies friendship with a wild animal. Here, I am inspired by Donna Haraway's ideas about making kin as a way to interact in a multi-species world. Author Barry Lopez calls for a more intimate and less rational relationship with nature, back to a sense of mystery, a state of awe. He calls for an enlightened response to indigenous cultures, whether Aztecan, Lakotan, Lupin, avian, or invertebrate, by broadening our sense of the intrinsic worth of life, and by cultivating respect for other ways of moving towards perfection, we may find a resolution we have been looking for, I think, for centuries. I shot this one primarily in 16mm film as well. And I captured it in the Arctic, Iceland, Svalbard, Finland. This work has been shown in as a single channel and as 4-channel installations. Here it is at GLOW 2013 in Santa Monica Pier. The screen is 25 feet in diameter, and the piece is about 30 feet tall. About 250,000 people were there. And it began just a little bit as when the sun started to set. And it was very beautiful to see the Arctic turn, and then about 100 pelicans just flying behind, so you could see them both at the same time. And then here is at 4 channels at the Cranes Art Icebox project space in Philadelphia. And then it just recently closed at the Mount Wilson Observatory, which was shown inside the dome, the 100-inch telescope. What a perfect place to show that work. This is Circumsolar Migration 3, which is a contemplation on migratory seabirds captured during their breeding season at La Traviarg, the westernmost point in Iceland, which is the largest bird cliff in all Europe. At any moment, be it day or night, there are great bird migrations taking flight. Ornithologists estimate that more than 5 billion birds annually journey across the hemisphere. Even greater than the complex weather systems, bird migration is the one unifying natural phenomenon in the world. And this is how it gets exhibited. And I need to rush. Any Instant Whatever is a 2-channel video projection, 16 by 39 feet, captured in Los Angeles in winter 2019-2020, sound composition by Drew Schnur, and it's a contemplation of one day in Los Angeles. Any Instant Whatever portrays a daytime sky in its textures and physics of blueness, its range of water formations sculpted by wind and pressures born out of our nearest star. Forces which, when synaptically processed, transform into emergent sensation of sublime beauty. This is the sky of our closest reach, the sky that most connects us in time to our deep evolutionary past, through which we peered into the night's other and its, until very recent, unreachable horizons. That's an expert by the curator, Steve Nolan. The sound, I commissioned, again, Drew Schnur. We were talking about how clouds are made out of, they look like crystals, right? It's water, and if it's ice. So then he created the composition with ice, with crystal bowls. And then as this moves, right, you know chronophotography, you know time-lapse photography. I adapted that to video. And so the sunset and sunrise meet, and they begin to move as you perceive the piece. Children are the best when they see the work. And this is the last piece I will show. The sea around us. I will first show you how it was exhibited. It's a 6-channel immersive video art installation, 360, 7.1 sound composition, again by Drew Schnur, at the Laguna Art Museum. And then I will show you the video as I read my last text. But I've been a diver since I was like 14, so I wanted to express the multiple voices of the ocean, and I'm the happiest that I was able to do that. But you will see that basically we found in front of Catalina Island, there's about 500,000 barrels of DDT that were dumped there. No one knows what to do with that. I'm part of the international group that we are constantly meeting on Zoom and listening to what's next. I've applied for grants for this, as this work will move into deep sea mining as well. All right, let me just run, and you get a sense of how this was shown. Okay, there is the video. My artwork takes its title from Rachel Carson's 1951 book, The Sea Around Us, in which the author writes, "Fish, amphibian, and reptile, warm-blooded bird and mammal, each of us carries in our veins a salty stream in which the elements sodium, potassium, and calcium are combined in almost the same proportions as in seawater." Carson reminds us that we owe our very existence to the ocean. Many of you may know Carson's groundbreaking book, Silent Spring, from 1962, which revealed the disastrous impacts of DDT and sparked the modern environmental movement. Yet few remember that in the 50s, she was a best-selling author of a wondrous trilogy of books on the sea, awakening the public to a fascination with and a love for the world's oceans as much as Jacques Cousteau and Sylvia Earle would do. I was part of that public. The Sea Around Us was commissioned by the Laguna Art Museum. It's a 360-degree immersive and cinematic experience and portrays the adjacent Pacific Ocean as a fully animated body, as well as a place of deep interconnectedness, where multi-species kinship fosters a sense of awe within us. This multimedia installation is the result of what is known as a research and fieldwork-based artistic practice, and I will take you through the process of creating the work as a means of illuminating what this type of practice entails and how such a project engages with the work of scientists. The curator Marcus Raymond has written, "One mandate of the arts is to make the invisible visible and provide society with a mirror, allowing us to position ourselves in time, but also to question these times and circumstances and systems." That is certainly part of what I was trying to do with this work. The Sea Around Us contends with past environmental abuse right off the Southern California coast. Through special reports by Los Angeles Times environmental reporter Rosanna Shah, I learned that beginning in 1947 and continuing through at least 1961, Montrose Chemical Corporation dumped barrels containing the pesticide DDT into the ocean near Santa Catalina Island, just 30 miles off the coast of Los Angeles, where I live. Investigation by scientists is ongoing, but it appears that the equivalent of around 500,000 barrels of chemicals still lay there, oozing their toxic payload that we now must confront. These materials have bioaccumulated across the food web, affecting the lives of our human and more than human kin. Research by Dr. Elisa Deming of the Pacific Marine Mammal Center in Laguna Beach shows that almost 20% of the sea lions in the California Bight have cancer, a much higher percentage than elsewhere. Their metabolism is very similar to that of humans, so the study of DDT effects on sea lions and other marine mammals is critical for our own health. The Sea Around Us incorporates scientific video captured by robots at depths of around 3,000 feet. UC Santa Barbara professor Dr. David Valentine and the Schmidt Ocean Institute kindly allowed me to use their revelatory footage in the artwork. The 55-gallon barrel, which plays a leading role in my artwork, is a symbol of some of the most earth-devouring industries of the 20th century, from fossil fuels to forever chemicals and radioactive materials. Today, we are forced to contend with its controversial heritage on land, in the air, and below the ocean surface. To face unmitigated disasters such as the ravages from DDT, the author, Donna Haraway, a feminist theorist who is committed to multi-species environmental justice,
Huel ataum.
proposes that we stay with the trouble. That is, that we confront
Ataum.
the repercussions of our troubled times
Ocean people.
and embrace our connections to our non-human kin.
Patingal ataum. Dolphin people. Pahila ataum. Sea turtle people. Yahweh wish ataum. Humans. Beautiful. Jo'onum no nashkinum. The star relatives above. The circle continues. From the stars to the dolphin, to the sea turtle, to the human being, and then returning again to the heavens and becoming the stars, sparkling so that the young ones below can see their faces.
So only when we embrace our connections with our non-human kin, we will reckon with our dominion and negligence, while repositioning ourselves as similarly threatened critters in the Anthropocene. It is from this position of equality and vulnerability that we open our imaginations to other ways of knowing and being on this planet. The sea around us embraces indigeneity as a profound way to relate to the ever-changing waterscape of the ocean and to inspire different modes of engagement with the natural world through which old and new imaginaries and cosmologies are brought to the foreground. Anishinaabe writer Robin Wall Kimmerer points out that in the Western tradition, humans are the pinnacle of evolution, while in native ways of knowing, humans are often referred to as the younger brothers of creation. Humans have the least experience with how to live and thus the most to learn, and must look to other species for guidance. For the sea around us, I sought guidance from and entered into kinship with abalone, a shelled marine snail that reflects the time immemorial of the sea, bringing us into the depths of geologic time some 70 million years ago, and informing the imagery and cosmology of cultures both ancient and present. These include the Tongva people, who began living in Catalina at least 8,000 years ago, and the Ahashimen, who have lived along the coast of what is now Orange County for at least 10,000 years. The abalone, and especially its shell, entered many indigenous peoples' cultures through subsistence, ceremony, and ornamentation. Abalone shells still play a prominent role in the traditional hupa ceremony in Northern California that marks girls' coming of age, serving as a kind of looking glass that reflects a vision of their future. Having researched indigenous transformational objects, I envisioned the abalone shell as a portal guiding us away from a self-making world and towards a making with world, together and deeply interconnected. I work with 3 generations of Ahashiman women, filming them interacting with the abalone shell underwater, and recorded them as they sang together. Flowing through the experience is their song, intended to encourage listeners to embrace the natural world through alternative values and worldviews. When the stories we tell about the ocean are rooted primarily in utilitarian purposes, transportation, militarization, and extraction, we miss thinking of the ocean as alive and full of spiritual, cultural, and ecological value. I hope my artwork provides an opening for viewers to enter into that way of thinking. The curator Stephanie Hessler has written, "While the arts may hardly save us, they could possibly generate momentary flashes of light that touch us, that wake us up, that show us that there may still be other ways." This scale is odd, but each one of these screens is about 60 feet, and it was presented at AGU, which is the largest climate scientist gathering in the world. And the 34-minute piece was shown as well to about 2,500 people. Yeah, but anyway, gracias. I'm open to your questions. I hope you have many.
I do have a microphone, so if you can raise your hand, if you have a question, I will bring it over to you.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you so much for that lecture and showing your work. During your lecture, I found myself holding my breath when people were underwater and thinking about how cold it was in the Arctic, and thinking about what you were talking about in the beginning of your talk about people being part of the world instead of in it. And I'm curious about apart from the ecological study, you're reflecting these uninhabitable places, but being inhabited. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I think that the way that I have thought about it is that whenever I put myself in those locations where it's the Arctic, deep in the ocean, it's as if my senses get awakened to perceive more precisely. So there is a sense of learning my own body and its ways of sensing as much as being able to perceive the spaces where I am. So there is almost like more permeability as a certain kind of osmosis happening. So I think that that idea of, I remember at the very beginning, I just wanted to dissolve myself, right? The idea of dissolution, I did a whole project around dissolution, because the boundaries dividing you and me, we have made them so impermeable. And I have to say that I feel that much stronger in the United States than I felt it in Mexico. In Mexico, our sense of community is stronger, our sense of families, like your sense of self, you are no one unless you are, like the whole set is okay. So that permeability, when I moved to this country, I could feel that everybody was very entrenched. So I feel that I need to unlearn that, and I need to be able to be much more permeable and much more, to be able to perceive others from human and more than human. So the Arctic, when I am in those spaces, I push myself to the limits. So therefore, it's even more, sometimes we can be in a mountain and say, I am here. But when you are in a place where, really nothing out there wants you to live, you're very aware of your every breath. You're very aware of your surroundings and caring for each other. Thank you.
I have a question about your creative process. I'd like to know how you source. Is something already an idea in your head of, let's say, something ecological that is occurring that inspires you? Or is it something that's given to you, says, can you do something with this? Like, I guess I'm trying to formulate my question. It's like, where is it coming from? And then from once it's been sourced, what's your creative process like? How does it expand?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. There are many processes. I don't have a single process. And there's times that I respond to the environment, that I just arrive, and I have been researching, of course, the environment, so I have a sense of it, and I understand and a bit of an understanding. But I always try to put myself in places where the known becomes the unknown. So like I said, unlearning and the unknowable or the unknown for me are places that I seek, because that place that we think we know is where we are limited and where we just stop imagining. So there's times that I just, let's say going to Iceland and arriving with my camera and knowing that I've been reading about, On Form and Growth by Darcy Thompson, or other things that I just kind of get into about the mechanisms of life. But then I find myself with the camera and I saw the grass becoming water, right? So that sense of I had to film that. And that's how that series began. It was by being there, by seeing and feeling like if I don't capture this, I will just stop breathing, because it's so beautiful, and it just spoke to me so much. So that one, then I captured the waterfall, I captured the river, I captured boiling mud and all kinds of things. So I was very sensitive to materiality and a different speed by which matter moved. That's why I love Iceland so much, because geologically it almost feels like it's moving at a different speed, and therefore it allows me to see more precisely. There are other things, for example, for the Laguna Art Museum, when I was commissioned to do a piece for their Art and Nature program, all I wanted to do was to express the voices of the ocean. The sea lions, the kelp, the currents, the plankton, the deep sea creatures. So research began, and that's when I enlist, that's what I love about being in a university. I have research grants, so I'm able to enlist an evolutionary biologist, an oceanographer, an ornithologist. So I bring these graduate students to conduct research. And when the information starts coming, like the DDT, the article from Rosanna Shah, so immediately I called Rosanna. I called David Valentine, who is the one who first filmed the barrels. I called Dr. Elisa Deming, who is doing the sea lion. So the microbiologist, everybody. That research was basically, I think I had about a year of research. So that, meanwhile, I'm already diving and diving and diving because I need to know, my body needs to know equally what I need to do. My head is doing, my research is doing, the analytical mind is doing that, but the body needs to know as well, and I need to listen to that. Like, how do I know that abalone was going to be a character? First, I began going down, and I saw abalone, and it reminded me of all the Pre-Columbian pieces whose eyes are abalone shell. So I started researching, indigenous cultures, and so it was kind of like it shoots in all directions, and it's the idea. How do you making a film, one of the hardest things for me was to give this 34-minute piece a rhythm. Okay, you are Rachel Carson, and you're teaching us about the magnificence of the ocean. So that was the beginning, immersion and the beauty and the otherworldliness of the ocean. And then you enter into the Anthropocene. You start seeing in the ocean, in the depths of the ocean, structures, anchors, chains, things that we have dumped in there. And then that leads to barren sea, which is nothing in the ground, right? You see that emptiness, which is what we will have with deep sea mining, which is what, when you take the sea otters out of, you play a little bit with the ecology. Take sea otters, sea urchins go nuts, they eat all the kelp, and there's no more kelp. And so you understand the ecology. So when you're there, and then suddenly from there you have the wisdom of the indigenous knowledge from time immemorial. So I have the underwater. I have this incredible elders from Tongva and Chumash and Ahashiman, bringing us another way of seeing, and that's when she goes into her creation story. But then what? Then how do I go from there? And then when the diver goes up and down and up and down, and I needed her to be a Pacific Islander. I needed her to be of the Pacific Ocean. And so she goes up and down. To me, that's the scientific process of observation. What am I seeing? What is this? And then goes up again, goes down again, and then suddenly she rages and grabs the barrels and throws them, and then embraces the barrels, staying with the trouble. You are part of my world. This darn DDT, and now we have learned is radioactive material. You're part of it. This is my world. I have to see you. I have to, like in Mexico, we say we take the bull by the horns. Otherwise, it gets you. So that's when you kind of engage with the idea that DDT is here to stay forever. So then how do we adapt? And we adapt by hope? No. You adapt by reciprocity. You adapt by community. You adapt by intergenerational care and love and caring for all that's living. And of course, that brings about hope, right? But it's not starting with hope, it's starting with reciprocity. But that process, hijo mano, at one point I just thought, it's like, I don't know what to do. I know the bits and the pieces, but how do I actually create this narrative? Because if you saw the beginning of my work, is very much impressions. So I have moved, in 20 years, I have moved from impressions to narrative. So I think that that's a kind of narrative, right? This has a vague narrative. So now I applied for a grant to be able to take this into to do a documentary. So we'll see, but the processes shift according to the work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you. Yay. Gracias.
Qué espectáculo.
Padre, ¿no?
Muy bueno, impresionante. ¿Salió bien?
Sí, salió súper bien. ¿Sabes qué? Tenía yo, de veras, 5 segundos cuando acabé.
Ah, sí.
No lo podía ver.
Perfecto.
O sea que estuvo súper bien. Hola.
It was great.